is described as a union of states, and we believe that the most critical aspect of our union is the conversation between members of our union. And there is an alternative vision, which is the BJP vision, which believes that power should be centralized, power should be concentrated, wealth should be concentrated, and the conversation between members of the union, between people of India, should be suppressed. And so this is the fight between two visions. I like to term it the fight between Mahatma Gandhi's vision and Nathuram Godse's vision. Nathuram Godse being the person who assassinated our leader.
A lot of sort of people who identify themselves as liberal Indians who still believe in the idea of a pluralistic India, and they were like, "Oh, he's here. We have no idea. Why is there no public meeting?" And so why do you think we did not organize that to sort of meet? Have an open, if I'm allowed to finish, an open meeting to meet all kinds of Indians who would have liked to sort of just see you or or talk to you. And the second question is let's
deal with one question at a time.
Everybody's been asking two.
Well, relax.
You can ask two.
No, one second.
So
when we design these tours, we have a structure, and the organizers decide whether we are going to have closed door meetings, whether we're going to have public meetings and stuff like that, depending on the length of the tour and the type of place we're going to. So I guess in Belgium, we sort of opted for a model. By the way, hundreds of people are coming and meeting us, and pretty much everybody in Belgium who of Indian origin knows exactly where I am, and they've been coming by droves to come and see me. But I think we decided that a full-blown Indian-style public meeting in Belgium might not be the best way to do it.
Your yatra across the country. Did you meet the youths, and did this issue actually really come up many times?
Yeah, I did.
Various states.
I met thousands and thousands of youngsters, and all of them said exactly what you're saying. The three things they said: number one, unemployment; number two, huge increase in the levels of poverty, and completely skewed income distribution. So few people getting very, very wealthy, and the bulk of people, being pushed back into poverty, and then rising prices and inflation. Those were the three things that repeatedly they told me. The fact of the matter is that India has the highest unemployment that it's had in the last 40 years. So there is something clearly wrong with our economic model. It's not accepted, and there's a lot of media support for the government. So those type of things don't come out. But I don't think the current path we are on, economic path we are on, is sustainable in any way. And there will certainly be consequences and a backlash to this model.
My name is Nadeem Bhatt. I am from ARI News. You have just talked about the minorities in India. I would like to ask about Kashmir. What is your party's stance on the current situation in Kashmir, and what step do you believe should be taken to address the ongoing conflict there? How do you view the role of international diplomacy in resolving the Kashmir issue, and what would you What would be your approach if your party comes into power?
Kashmir is, of course, an integral part of India, so it's nobody's business other than our own, other than India's business. Our position, as I stated earlier, is very clear. It's in a working committee resolution. We can give you a copy of that resolution if you're interested in reading it. But I feel that it's very important, the general discussion we're having here, that democratic institutions, democratic structures need to be protected in India, and the voice of people needs to be defended and protected. And that goes for every single part of India, including Kashmir.
This is obviously been caused.
These are
Bharat Jodo, so is
I am
that
perfectly happy with the names that we have in our constitution. India, that is Bharat, works perfectly well for me. But I think these, in a sense, to me, are panic reactions. There's a little bit of fear in the government. These are distraction tactics. We, of course, came out with the name India for our coalition, and it's a fantastic idea because it represents exactly who we are. We consider ourselves to be the voice of India, and so the word works very well. But it's obviously disturbed the Prime Minister enough that he wants to change the name of the country, which is absurd, but that's what it is. It's also interesting that every time we raise the issue of Mr. Adani and crony capitalism, the Prime Minister comes out with some dramatic new diversion tactic. It's curious that just after I did a press conference on Adani, this entire diversion is put into place. It's interesting.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
EU journalist for Radio Nova Time. Again, thank you. In view of the COP28, the climate conference in Dubai, what are your expectations? And do you think that India is going to be the major spokesperson for the Global South? Thank you.
Well, I don't know. I think India has a relationship with the Global South, and I think there are bonds there, historical bonds there, that make us close to the Global South. I don't know if we are the spokesman of the Global South, but certainly we have a relationship with them. On the environment, of course, we are, as a planet, going through these large transitions, energy transition in the way we move. And I think environment is a central issue for India. It's, of course, not in a country where there are many poor people. It's difficult to make environment top of mind, but I think it is a critical issue, and it's very important that we think about it in a strategic and a long-term way.
Thanks. Brian Ricketts, representing the European coal industry, and I've enjoyed visits to European coal industry, and I've
uh, the type of conversations I had with tribal people about the environment were far more sophisticated than I have with people living in cities, right? So there is an inherent wisdom in the people of India, and I'm sure in the people of Europe and people of Belgium. And I think it's critical for us that in decision making, we listen to the voice and the intelligence of the people. And that's where we have a fundamental difference with the BJP. We value the voice of the people, we value the voice of poor people, we value the voice of all stakeholders, and we want to hold a conversation with stakeholders before we make decisions. It's sometimes slower, but in the long run, it works out much better. And that's really the conflict that is taking place in India. They're of the view that you don't need to ask people, you just go ahead and slam everything through. But in our view, there's consequences. With regards to the public sector and the private sector, we're
Um, I think the agenda that you're talking about, mostly what has been happening in the election manifestos, usually, the manifestos of the parties, that's how the elections were initially fought or held, where parties came and spoke about the manifestos. Now, with all the changes that have happened in India, we know so many PSUs have been privatized or are on the verge of being privatized in India. How, in case in next year's elections, in case tables turn and we see the opposition and the alliance probably coming forward and running the country, how do you think those kind of changes that were, that is so massive that have been happening, can be reverted
which
or
changes?
corrected? The privatization of public sector units, that has been happening in India. How do you actually rectify that? Because that has actually taken away employment of so many housewives. No, I mean, women like my mother would probably be a very good candidate for an SBI, banking job, but a private sector will not necessarily employ a person of her age and will look for a more competitive, growth. So I think that's where I see a lot of people will lose employment because of this in India and are doing that. How does this get rectified?
Where we draw the line is the notion of crony capitalism, right? We don't have a problem with the private sector. We don't have a problem with the government sector. Where we draw the line is where one or two people start to financially control the whole country, right? And where one or two people or three people are running everything. That's where our problem begins. There's another element to this, which is that government policies in India have systematically attacked the backbone of our employment system. If you look at who gives employment in India, it's the small and medium industry that gives employment in India. And demonetization and GST have devastated those structures, right? So it's a two-pronged attack that the government is carrying out. Number one, impose a huge transaction cost on all small and medium businesses and ensure that you build 2 or 3 monopolists who control pretty much everything, right? So if you look at Mr. Adani, our problem with Mr. Adani is he controls the ports, he controls the airports, he controls agriculture, he controls grain silos, he has real estate. I mean, he's everywhere. And he's dominant everywhere. He controls cement, right? So we think that's counterproductive for the country. and on one side they are pushing this very monopolistic capital, and on the other side they're devastating the small and medium people from where we're going to get a job. That's why we're having an unemployment crisis. And the second part is where you require key services, right? Country like India requires the government to be involved in education. It requires the government to be involved in healthcare. And the idea that you can just privatize education and privatize healthcare, it devastates the poorest people because they simply do not have access to this. So they are hitting this from 3 or 4 sides, and the solutions are pretty clear. I mean, we would invest much more in health and education. We would protect small and medium businesses. We would try to build an economy where small and medium businesses transition to medium businesses, and then to large businesses, and then to massive businesses, right? If you look at our small and medium businesses, almost none of them become big businesses, right? They remain small or they die, right? And it's because of policy. So you can change policies to ensure that you start building. And then scale it up. And for example, Manrega was such a case where we ran a small pilot, then we scaled it into a state, and then we scaled it into the nation. We don't believe in these rash decisions where you suddenly demonetize the economy or you suddenly impose a GST. We believe in seeding an idea, letting that idea grow, testing the idea, and then scaling it across. Chhattisgarh has some very good ideas on how to support farmers with minimum prices. Karnataka has our, the sort of support that we're giving to women in Karnataka. That's some very interesting work that's going on. And in each one of our states, you can see the sort of type of ideas that we will use when we come to power.
Last question.
When you were talking to the parliamentarians, you said there was a conversation and you were informing them about sharing, your reading of what's happening in India. And you have repeated here that, there are problems back home when it comes to institutions and democratic structures. What was their response to you? Did they seem concerned? Did they seem...
Yeah, they were very concerned. They were very concerned, and they felt that they felt that there is an attempt to stifle the democratic structures of India, for sure. And I mean, they were very, very clear with us.
Okay.
Have more questions?
You have more questions?
Yeah.
No, I
I
think 5 questions for one person is good enough. I mean, if you,
Okay.
Responses are coming to everybody.
Thank you. No, but thank you very much for your
की इज्जत करने वाले लोग हम हैं, गरीबों की इज्जत करने वाले लोग हम हैं। और जो संविधान किसने बनाया? कांग्रेस पार्टी ने बनाया। लेकिन डॉक्टर अंबेडकर के हाथ में ये जो अध्यक्ष पद मिला, उन्होंने गरीबों के लिए अपने सारे जितने भी कार्यक्रम हैं उन्होंने इसमें लाया। लाने के बाद पंडित जवाहरलाल नेहरू जी के नेतृत्व में एक एक करके संविधान में जो जितने भी चीजें थी, आर्टिकल्स थे, उसको इम्प्लीमेंट करने को शुरू किया। और बड़े बड़े कारखाने छत्तीसगढ़ में भी आए, झारखंड में आए, बेंगलुरु में आए, बम्बई में, हर जगह बड़े बड़े कारखाने आए, लाखों लोग नौकरी पे चले। लेकिन मोदी साहब और शाह जी, आप आने के बाद कितने पब्लिक सेक्टर बनाए, हमको हिसाब दो। कितने आईआईटी बनाए, कितने मेडिकल कॉलेज बनाए, कितने आप बीएचईएल, बीईएल या स्टील कारखाने या पावर कारखाने ये बनाए आपने? नहीं। जब हम बना रहे तो उसको आड़े आते हैं। और हमारा इतना जो ये अपना इतनी चीजें हमने की, उसके वजह से देश आगे बढ़ रहा है। और मेहनत हम किए, मेहनत करके हमने पावर प्लांट्स लगाए, स्टील प्लांट्स लगाए, इलेक्ट्रिकल प्लांट्स लगाए। इतने बड़े बड़े करने के बाद अब मोदी जी बोलते देश को मैं आगे बढ़ा रहा हूं। कहां बढ़ा रहे? अरे वो गुजरात तो जहां का वहीं है। सब आप देख लीजिए ह्यूमन इंडेक्स, वो ह्यूमन इंडेक्स में अगर सबसे बच्चों को सबसे कमजोर बच्चे कहां मिलते हैं या पौष्टिक आहार की कमी कहां है, तो वो गुजरात में है, छत्तीसगढ़ में नहीं है। ये गुजरात मॉडल है। तो इसलिए तुम बताइए वो ह्यूमन राइट, अपने ह्यूमन इंडेक्स बता के कहिए साहब आप ही के पास इतने बच्चे मर रहे हैं, पौष्टिक आहार नहीं है, तो दूसरों को क्यों टीका कर रहे हो? और मैं कहूंगा इन्हों तो हमेशा कांग्रेस को टीका के करते रहते। यहां बीजेपी की हुकूमत 15 साल थी। कितने साल थी? 15 साल। मोदी जी 13.5 साल गुजरात के थे। अब 9 साल, अब 10 साल होने को है, 10 साल से प्रधानमंत्री है। जो काम 5 साल में कांग्रेस करती है, आप क्यों नहीं किए? मैं पूछता हूं, आपके पास क्यों नहीं हो रहा? क्योंकि आप गरीबों को देखने वाले नहीं है। सिर्फ आप किनको देखते हैं? अमीरों को, बड़े बड़े कंपनी को, अदानी को, अंबानी को, इनको देखने वाले लोग हैं। हमारे तरफ झांक के भी नहीं देखते। और ऊपर से कहते हैं हम गरीबों की भलाई के लिए सब कुछ कर रहे हैं। तो इसीलिए भाइयों, मैं आपसे यही कहूंगा कि हमको बड़ा जागृत रहना चाहिए। और आजकल सबको फंसा रहे। जो लिखेगा उनके खिलाफ उसको भी, जो पेपर में लिखेगा, टीवी में बोलेगा या बाहर बोलेगा, उस सब को या तो नोटिस देते, अंदर डालते, डराते। तो ये लोग किसी को अपना एक सपोर्ट करके वो लोगों का मदद करने वाले नहीं है। इसीलिए वो क्या करते हैं, हर जगह तलाश कर रहे हैं। किसकी लाल डायरी बोलते हैं, किसकी नीली डायरी, किसकी पीली डायरी, कुछ कुछ ऐसा बोलते हैं। और ऐसा ही एक छापा जो जर्नलिस्ट के घर पे पड़ा, तो उन्होंने एक बात लिखी, हर घर की तलाशी का हुक्म होगा, हर घर की तलाशी का हुक्म होगा। कौन करेंगे? मोदी करेंगे। तलाशी लो बोल के हर घर की तलाशी का हुक्म होगा। अब हर सेक्स के किताबें जब्त होगी, वे सब पकड़े जाएंगे शरीक के जुर्म में, शरीक के जुर्म में। जिनकी जेब से कलम बरामद होगी वही चोर ये समझ जाएंगे। जिसके जेब से कलम भी अगर मिली तो उसको बोलेंगे चल ईडी, चलो आगे। अरे ऐसी सरकार आज है, इसको हटाना और इसको अपने अगर जगह पे ठिकाने पे अगर आप नहीं रखेंगे तो देश बर्बादी की ओर चलेगा। देश में डेमोक्रेसी नहीं रहेगी और देश में जो संविधान गरीबों के लिए डॉक्टर बाबा साहब अम्बेडकर ने मेहनत करके बनाया है वो भी नहीं रहेगा। और आज सिर्फ चुपका चुप, अब उनका भी सीएजी रिपोर्ट आया है, सब उसमें सब निकला है 7 लाख करोड़ से भी ज्यादा घोटाले हुए हैं, 7 लाख करोड़। और हमको डराते हर मीटिंग में, कहीं भी जाओ 2G का क्या हुआ, कोल का क्या हुआ, उसका। अरे वो तो हो गया, तुम क्या कर रहे हो वो पहले बताओ। ये 7 लाख के घोटाले कहां से आ गए? सीएजी तो हमारा नहीं है, गवर्नमेंट हमारी नहीं है, गवर्नमेंट तो आपकी है और आपके लोग बोल रहे हैं, बता रहे हैं। तो ऐसे लोग दूसरों के तरफ उंगली दिखाते हैं, लेकिन 4 उंगलियां उनके तरफ भी दिखती, तो ये वो सोच रहे नहीं। तो मैं एक बात आपसे कहना चाहता हूं, बढ़ती हुई महंगाई को भी ये रोक नहीं सकते। अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट बढ़ रहा है, कम से कम। पहले तो ये कहते थे अगर मुझे प्रधानमंत्री बनाओगे मैं आप सबको नौजवानों को 2-2 करोड़ नौकरियां दूंगा। कहते थे या नहीं? 2 करोड़ बोले तो अब 10 साल हो गए, 20 करोड़ नौकरियां कहां हैं? दिए? क्यों नहीं दिए? अरे आप झूठ बोल रहे। 2000 नौकरियां लेके उनको 2 करोड़ नौकरियां लेके आप नहीं बोल रहे। 20 करोड़ नौकरियां, कैसा झूठ बोलते प्राइम मिनिस्टर। प्राइम मिनिस्टर पाप बेचारा कभी झूठ नहीं बोलेगा, क्योंकि 140 करोड़ जनता का नुमाइंदगी करता है। वो कैसा झूठा बोले? बराबर 20 करोड़ लोगों को नौकरी मिली होगी। 15 लाख रुपए कालाधन बाहर से लाके देने वाले थे, वो मिला क्या? वो भी नहीं मिला। तो आप बदनाम कर रहे मोदी जी को। आप बेचारा हो इतनी कोशिश करके बोला, कोई तो झूठ बोले, हम झूठ बोले होंगे, लेकिन वो नहीं झूठ बोलता ना। ये ऐसा ही उनके पूरे वायदे। किसानों का दाम दुगना होगा, हो गया। अरे जो भूपेश बघेल ने दिया उतना ही बढ़ा, लेकिन उन्होंने क्या दिया? तो ये चीजें, अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, महंगाई, ये सारी चीजें आज हमारे सामने हैं। इसे हमको काम करना है। और हमारी सरकार आज भी जो अनएम्प्लॉयड ग्रेजुएट है उनको सरकार के ओर से कितना दे रहे? 2,500 2,500 हमारी सरकार दे रहे। उनके पास कोई युवकों के लिए योजना नहीं है। पहले तो खूब बोले, वोट बटोरे, चुन के आए, चुन के आने के बाद वो दिल्ली में, हम सब लोग गली में, देहातों में ही रह गए। वह मणिपुर के तरफ झांके नहीं, देख रहे नहीं, और यहाँ G20 का ये चल रहा है। हर जगह हर खंबे को उनका ही फोटो है। मैं बोला लोगों को याद दिला रहे क्या? क्योंकि इतने जितने खंबे हैं दिल्ली में, हर खंबे के ऊपर मोदी का फोटो, उनके कोई मिनिस्टर का भी नहीं, एक आधा भी। अच्छा, महात्मा गांधी जी का नहीं है, जवाहरलाल नेहरू जी का नहीं है, किसी का नहीं है, सिर्फ मोदी अकेला। यानी मोदी का नाम रखते ही ये बीजेपी वालों को क्या हुआ मुझे मालूम नहीं, भारत रखो बोले। अरे भाई, संविधान में है इंडिया मीन्स भारत। ये तो बाबा साहब ने आर्टिकल 1 और सब क्लॉज 1 में लिखा है। फिर क्यों झगड़ा भाई? हम कोई बोलते हैं तो आप लोग उसको हमको कहते हैं कि हम विरोधी है भारत बोलने का। अरे भारत से तो हम इतना प्रेम करते हैं, उस शब्द से कन्याकुमारी से कश्मीर तक जो राहुल जी ने पैदल चले, उसका नाम क्या था? भारत जोड़ो। अरे भारत जोड़ने में हम लगे हैं, उसके टुकड़े टुकड़े करने में आप लगे हैं। ये है 4,500 किलोमीटर राहुल गांधी चले। तुम कहां चल रहे हो? सुबह वो टीवी में तो बताते हैं उनको, इधर से उधर, उधर से इधर फिरने का। अब देखे होंगे। तो हमको सिखाते हो भारत बोलो, भारत बोलो। अच्छा, हमको सिखाने वाले आपने क्या किया मैं बताऊंगा आपको। आपने क्या किया? अगर इंडिया के बारे में नफरत है, मैं कभी भी उनको पूछते रहता हूं अगर पार्लियामेंट है तो, लेकिन आजकल पार्लियामेंट में भी वो नहीं आते, इसीलिए मैं आपके सामने रखूंगा। उन्होंने कितने शब्द इंडिया इंडिया डाले, भारत नहीं डाले। स्टार्टअप इंडिया, ये किसका है? स्टार्टअप इंडिया, डिजिटल इंडिया, स्किल इंडिया, मेक इन इंडिया, शाइनिंग इंडिया, खेलो इंडिया, जीतेगा इंडिया, पढ़ेगा इंडिया, बढ़ेगा इंडिया। ये सब किसने किया? किसने नाम दिया? ये सब मोदी ने दिया। अब हम इंडिया बोल रहे तो वो लोग भारत। अरे ये इंडिया बोले तो सब लोग मिलके इंडिया, इंडिया मुश्किल है। तो ये इनकी जो एक मानसिकता है, इस मानसिकता के खिलाफ भी लड़ना है। और हम कभी किसी के खिलाफ नहीं बोलते, और कोई प्रोग्राम अपना है उसको स्वीकार करते हैं। हमने मनरेगा किया, क्या किसी का नाम रख के किया? सिर्फ इस देश के महापिता महात्मा गांधी जी के नाम से रखा। हम फूड सिक्योरिटी, पेट भरने के लिए अनाज दिए, लेकिन हमने किसी का नाम नहीं रख लिया। और बच्चों को पढ़ाई के लिए कंपलसरी एजुकेशन किया, किसी का नाम नहीं रख। हम हमेशा गरीबों की भलाई के लिए सोचते हैं, नाम कमाने के लिए नहीं। उठते ही नाम बदलो। वो प्राइम मिनिस्टर का नेहरू म्यूजियम था, नेहरू म्यूजियम को बदल के आप देखो रिसेंटली उन्होंने 2 खंबे लगा के अब उसको प्रधानमंत्री म्यूजियम्स, तो जितने भी प्रधानमंत्री हैं वो उसमें गए। तो नेहरू जी के ऊपर
Citizen has enabled bank account for every citizen, has enabled everyone to do fast payments, has enabled everyone to improve learning outcomes and health outcomes. And during the COVID, we were able to do 2.2 billion COVID vaccinations. And therefore, technological development and how to use digital public infrastructure to drive growth, when 4 billion people of the world do not have digital identity, about 3 billion people do not have bank accounts, and over 133 countries do not have fast payments. That was critical from India's priorities perspective. And the last key priority which the Prime Minister elucidated and which he felt very strongly about was women-led development, to bring women-led development, to bring women empowerment and gender equality. So these have been the 6 key priorities of India on which we have worked. We started our presidency on which the Foreign Secretary will talk about, with a meeting of the Voice of the Global South. We got the perspective of 125 leaders, and then we remained focused on the perspective of the Global South and the requirements of the developing countries. And the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration, which many of you will see post the summit, you will see it as a voice of the Global South and the developing countries. No document in the world would have such a strong voice for the Global South and the developing countries as the New Delhi Leaders' Declaration. And therefore, the Prime Minister's vision of India's G20 presidency being a very inclusive presidency has been our aim. There's been a huge scale and reach of India's presidency. There have been 19 G20 countries and EUs, and the EU, that means 20, 9 special invitee countries. There have been 3 regional organizations. There have been 11 international organizations who participated in all the 220 meetings that took place in India. We were able to use this opportunity to take the meeting to over 60 cities of India and every state and every union territory of India, and use this opportunity to demonstrate the liveliness, the vibrancy, and the dynamism of India's federal polity. Every state vigorously participated, and we were able to translate and bring a huge transformation to the city infrastructure in 60 cities. When G20s are held across other countries, they are held in the capital or maximum 2 cities. In India's case, we've held them over 60 cities of India and used this as an opportunity to transform them. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've had over the biggest participation in G20 from across the world. We have had Africa's highest ever participation. In addition to the 29 countries, we have had 32 additional countries. We've been the voice of the Global South. We've done a huge number of during this period, we've used this opportunity also to push a huge amount of Indian narrative through one district, one product. That is, every district which has come out with a product. Focused, that was the only gift we gave to all the visitors who came during our presidency, so that we could have an impact on the lives of our artisans. We have focused on millets, which is critical from the viewpoint of sustainability of agriculture. We have focused on achievements of India as a mother of democracy, as focused on the digital transformation and digital public infrastructure. Uh, so with these few words, ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you that our presidency has been inclusive, decisive, and action-oriented. Our New Delhi leaders' declaration is almost ready. I would not like to dwell on it because this declaration will be recommended to the leaders and the leaders will then accept it. And only after it has been accepted, leaders, we'll be able to talk about the actual achievements of this declaration. With these few words, I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. May I now hand over the floor to Shri Ajay Seth, Finance Deputy, sir.
Good afternoon to all. Let me share some of the priorities which the finance related work handled during the course of the presidency. Under the leadership of our Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, the focus and the vision of India G20 presidency has been to bring focus to the global discourse to issues which make a difference to people's lives, lead to actionable, decidable, sustainable and inclusive growth, and empower the global growth. Keeping that vision in mind, the priorities which were set and endorsed by finance ministers and governors in February in their first meeting in Bangalore, some of them were how to strengthen multilateral development banks for challenges of 21st century. Similar manner, how to support a strong, sustainable, balanced and inclusive growth in the midst of the current challenges which the world is facing. In the same vein, how to manage the debt vulnerabilities which several countries are facing. Yet another priorities was that how the technology can be used for financial inclusion, for productivity gains, for efficiency, for private sector. Similarly, how the new potentials of technology such as blockchain or crypto can be beneficial and yet how to build a policy discourse, the policy approaches and what set of regulation building consensus around that. So these were some of the priorities, and during the course of the year, in more than 25 meetings of various working groups, ministers, deputies, these efforts. And one unique feature of the work has been, I'll put it rather two big elements, two big differences. One was to go beyond the structured meetings and arrange almost 40 seminars, side events, symposiums, inviting domestic as well as global experts and generating a very intense discussion to find a robust way forward. In a similar vein, how to generate the local connect, Jan Bhagidari. Almost 40 events were done on issues which are relevant to people's lives. Based on these deliberations over the course of the year, these recommendations have now been placed for consideration of the leaders. They would be discussing it over the course of next 2 days, and then we will have definite outcomes and we will all share with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. May I request Shri Harshvardhan Shringla, Chief Coordinator, sir. Chief Coordinator, sir.
Namaskar and good afternoon. The press conference is on the G20 New Delhi summit. But since many of our media friends have joined us only today, I'll briefly begin by taking you through our presidency journey. As you know, we assumed the presidency of the G20 on the 1st of December last year, and we will conclude our presidency on the 30th of November this year. During the course of our presidency, we would have hosted over 220 G20 meetings in 60 different cities across the length and breadth of our country. In keeping with the Prime Minister's vision of a pan-Indian G20, we will have hosted one G20 meeting in at least one G20 meeting in every state and union territory of India. And to my mind, that is the finest example of cooperative federalism that we can see. Now, the effort has been, of course, to take the G20 down to the grassroots level through a process that we call Jan Bhagidari, which is a people's participation movement. And whether it is through the G20 University Connect or the G20 Model School or quiz, essay and painting competitions and festivals, the G20 has been popularized and taken down to the grassroots levels in our country. We have also looked at the G20 as an showcase India's rich cultural heritage and diversity and our tourism potential. And in that context, we have hosted over 300 cultural events with the participation of over 18,000 of our cultural artists and exponents. Of course, we have also made our presidency an inclusive one. Sherpa already mentioned that we've had very significant participation from the global south and from Africa. We would have received a total of about 100,000 visitors for our G20 presidency from over 125 nationalities. And for many of them, this has been the discovery of a new India. And I think that has been very significant from their point of view. Clearly, the G20 presidency will bring economic benefits to our country and to our citizens, and that's also been a very important objective. Now, when you organize such a huge exercise, an unprecedented and uniquely Indian presidency, you do need an organizational base. And we have started on the organization and planning of the G20 as early as the beginning of last year, 1.5 years before today's eve of the summit. We have set up the G20 Secretariat. In this process, it has been a whole of government approach and a whole of nation approach. And every single Indian citizen has been involved in that effort. And it's very important to note that about 15 million of our citizens have been directly involved in the participation of some G20 event or the other across our country. So in that organizational endeavor, we've had guidance from the Prime Minister himself, from cabinet ministers. There is a coordination committee which has been set up under the Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister, which includes the NSA, which includes cabinet secretaries, senior secretaries, Sherpa and all of us here. And this committee has been meeting regularly. It's met at least 9 times formally, but many times informally, and has provided extensive guidance on every aspect and overseen every aspect of the presidency's organization and management. So I think that was important. Now, on the summit itself, of course, Foreign Secretary and Sherpa will take you through the program elements, but it's important for you to know what else is there and what are the activities and exhibitions and other events which are within the Bharat Mandapam, within the G20 summit complex. Of course, the media center is one that you have seen. Both halls 4 and 5 have been earmarked for the media center. We expect to host between 2,000 and 3,000 international and domestic media here. It will be a state-of-the-art media center with over 1,300 workstations, high-speed internet, and Additional Secretary XP would have communicated to you the other aspects of this media center. There is an emphasis on the cultural aspects of our presidency as well. There is a very unique exhibition which is called the Cultural Corridor, which will be on display at the convention center. This involves the display of cultural artifacts and objects from different countries, both tangible and intangible heritage, but also natural heritage. So this has some very, very interesting exhibits, which the details of which will be available with you. We also have an immersive display, which has, again, some of the best illustrations of every country that is a part of our G20 presidency. And all of this, again, is at the convention center. There's a democracy cube, which is also there. And what we will certainly do is that we'll make this available, we'll make this open to the media and the public after we finish the immediate summit. And this would be a very interesting exhibition to see. Besides that, we have the Mother of Democracy exhibition. India is the largest democracy, vibrant democracy over the ages, has arranged an exhibition which would be essentially narrating the 7,000-year tradition of democracy in our country from the ancient to the modern. There will be 26 interactive panels which would be available in all of the G20 languages. There are apparently 16 languages in which this will be available. There is also a bronze replica of a girl from the Sindhu Saraswati era, 2,500 to 3,500 years before. And this is a very unique part of the exhibition, at the center of the exhibition. And there will also be someone who will greet everybody. It's artificial intelligence driven, so it's a technology oriented platform. And of course, the person who will greet will also provide an introduction to India's age-old democratic traditions in their respective languages. You are also aware that we will have, at the time of the dinner that will be hosted tomorrow by our president, there will be a musical ensemble which will play in the background. This, of course, will represent, again, musicians from all parts of our country, but it will also include musical traditions of every nature, whether it's Hindustani, Carnatic, folk, bhajans. Every aspect of music in our country will be covered by these 77 musicians, who would also include young students, people who have some disabilities, but also people who are from different walks of life across our country. They will also be displaying some very rare instruments, musical instruments, which are hardly ever seen or played in our country, but this is something that is an opportunity for us to see so many rare instruments coming together in this particular area. Now, there will be a strong emphasis on technology, especially technology that is linked to digital public infrastructure. And in that context, we will have a few exhibitions at the media center. If you enter the foyer of the media center, you will see a display by our Ministry of Information Technology, which is basically a digital India experience zone, which will have the display of all of the mobile apps and the platforms under which we have arranged to deliver development to the grassroots levels in India, right from Aadhaar to UPI, and this entire India stack will be available. And if any of you do fall sick or have any medical issues, please ensure that you go and connect with eSanjeevani, a digital platform that will have a doctor advise you immediately on the spot. Similarly, we have a Reserve Bank of India Innovation Hub, which is again in the media center. And this Innovation Hub will display technologies that fintech, which has not yet been introduced to the public domain. These are still in the pilot stages. One of them is the central bank digital currency, through which even international media who are here, who don't have bank accounts in India, will be able to get some money in their mobile wallets and will be able to use that digitally to buy products in our crafts mela, which will be in the adjoining hall, hall number 3. And this crafts mela will also, each stall of the crafts mela, which represents a different state or union territory of India, displaying, as Sherpa mentioned, the ODOP products and geographical indicator products, will have a QR code compatible with your mobile wallet, the digital currency, and with the UPI. We will also have a frictionless credit display, which basically, again, is a cutting-edge technology under which any credit to be given, say, to our farmers, the information relating to that would be immediately available on your mobile phone or your iPad, from the land records to your Aadhaar to your previous credit history. And this will enable credit to be given within a few minutes of time with each of the farmers. And so from that point of view, I think we also have, I hope all of you have downloaded our digital app, the G20 India digital app, which is again a state-of-the-art app, which enables you to get this in any language in the G20. You can get it in Portuguese, in German, in Japanese. And this will also enable you to talk to anybody who doesn't understand your language, say from Hindi to Japanese or from Portuguese to German. It will be instant conversation through the app. You can navigate from one part of the Bharat Mandapam to any other part of this complex. It will enable you to get there without a problem. And any information that you may need on our presidency, on the G20, on India, UPI, any aspects of this is available. And of course, if you feel like a yoga break, that's also there. on our app. So I'll stop here. I'm sure there are many other things, but we will stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. May I hand over to Foreign Secretary Shivanay Quatra.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to friends from the media, both domestic and international. I have 6 brief points to make, besides what has already been shared by my colleagues, senior colleagues, Sherpas, Chief Coordinator and Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs. Point number first, if you really want to get a sense of India's vision, priorities and approach to the G20 presidency, I would encourage all of you to read the op-ed that the Honorable Prime Minister of India has written yesterday. It captures, it distilled a sense of how India envisions and looks at the ongoing G20 presidency of India. 2, the coming together of the 41 heads of delegations, heads of state, government, heads of international organization in India starting yesterday is under Prime Minister's personal leadership and direction. It is essentially a celebration of the coming together of the G20 family. And as our Sherpa mentioned earlier, it's the largest ever participation of the Global South in India. 3, whether it concerns India's national priorities with regard to G20 or the priorities of G20 countries as a collective, as also the concerns and interests of the Global South. The specifics of the agenda which the Sherpa and the Department of Economic Affairs Secretary mentioned, they have been structured in a most inclusive and the harmonious concepts of one earth, one family, one future. 4, very briefly with regard to the program of the G20 summit. The summit official conference program is structured around 2 sessions. First one Earth, starting tomorrow morning, One Family tomorrow afternoon, and One Future in the morning of the 10th. Besides 3 sessions of the conference, there would also be a couple of sideline events which are currently being structured involving India and other heads of the state who are visiting us here. Third, a dinner by the Honorable President of India tomorrow. 4th, a visit to the Rajghat to pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi. And 5th, a spouses program. These would be the broad 5 elements of the summit. And the last 5th point which I wanted to make, Honorable Prime Minister of India will also be hosting several sideline bilateral meetings during the course of this G20 summit with the visiting heads of state governments and the other leaders who are going to be in Delhi, as I said, starting yesterday till their departure over 10th and 11th. I would stop here and see if we have any questions on this.
Thank you very much, sir. May I lay the ground rules before I open the... Please sit down. Thank you. Please introduce yourselves and the organization you represent. We will take questions in a group because we don't have time. Let me start with Manish here, TV9. Microphones will come to you. Please wait.
Thank you. First of all,
please introduce yourself and the organization.
This is Manish Jha from TV9. Amitabh ji, Foreign Secretary and Chief Coordinator. I must tell you first of all that arrangement at International Media Center are really excellent. I have attended 4 summits before this summit, and I can tell very proudly that these arrangements are really best. So thank you so much. So my question I would like to ask in Hindi. अमिताभ जी, लगातार आप लोग ज्वाइंट डिक्लेरेशन को लेकर लगे हुए थे, बहुत मेहनत कर रहे थे. आपने हिंट भी किया है कि ज्वाइंट डिक्लेरेशन आएगा और बहुत अलग तरीके से बहुत खास होगा. लेकिन खबरें ये भी आ रही थी कि चीन की तरफ से हर मीटिंग में ज्वाइंट डिक्लेरेशन में कोई कंसेंसस ना हो, इसके लिए कोशिश की जा रही थी. कभी वसुधैव कुटुंबकम के नाम पर, कभी किसी और की लैंग्वेज जो है संस्कृत में क्यों है. तो किस तरह ये जर्नी रही, अगर आप इसको शेयर कर सके, क्योंकि हर जर्नलिस्ट यही पूछ रहा है ज्वाइंट डिक्लेरेशन आएगा या नहीं आएगा, अगर आएगा तो कैसे आएगा.
Yashi, yep.
This is Yeshi Seli from the New Indian Express. I'd like to know, Yeshi Seli from the New Indian Express. I'd like to know who's representing African Union. Is it Wacky Sol for the G20? And is the G20 officially going to be
Yashi,
called...
you're not audible. Could you repeat again?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So this is Yeshi Seli from the New Indian Express. I'd like to know who is representing the African Union for the summit, and is the G20 officially going to be called G21 after the conclusion of the summit?
Okay. Siddhant?
Hi, sir. I'm Siddhant from Vion. My question is, do you think the absence of the Chinese president impact, is it an attempt by the Chinese to undermine? Do you see it in that way as well?
The lady in yellow behind.
Samira Hussain with the